Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Laser Sports Academy podcast. I have a very, very special episode today with three very special gentlemen. This is the first time we're branching outside of zone, which is really exciting that we're talking about this. These guys run a tournament called Armageddon, which many of us have heard about, but not many of us in our community know a huge amount about. But I know there's a lot of curiosity. The tournaments run in the UK and the US, and these guys are specialists on their particular system and are here to talk to us about Armageddon and a little bit about the various systems that many of us haven't even touched before. So there is quite a resume in front of me. Bear with me while I get through the introductions, but I'm going to introduce George first. George Raptus, his alias is Icarus, comes from Laserstorm. He has 2 golds at the US Armageddon and 4 Laserstorm Nats victories, and has participated in the US and the UK Armageddons. Is also a site operator, runs all the Laserstorm comps, and is from Jester's Court originally, now Skyway. So is Skyway your site, George?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So that is your introduction. Welcome along, George.
Thanks for having me.
And I've noticed a little bit in your bio about designing some of your own things too. So when we get to the systems, I can't wait to hear about that. I'm really curious about what that looks like. Next person in the pod today is Sean Copewithit. Is a Laser Blast original player and now multi-system, as all these guys are multi-system players. Has been playing competitively for 13 years, 10 years of Armageddon, 4 US golds, 1 UK gold. Sounds like this guy can play. From Zap Zone, originally from Zap Zone in Ann Arbor, Michigan, or still from Zap Zone?
Yeah, home sites changed over the years, but originally from Michigan Blast.
Cool. And where's your home site now?
Dayton, Ohio. Scene 75, Dayton.
All right. Okay. So you guys are all, which is kind of, in perspective, west to east, how far from the east are you guys?
We're all pretty much Midwest, or
Midwest.
Havok's about to be Midwest.
I'm about to be. So currently I'm in Baltimore, Maryland, which is just north of Washington, D.C. So I'm on the East Coast right now, but about to move within a few hours of these guys.
Yes. Okay. That's gonna be cool. I look forward to hearing also about just where the hotspots are in the US, essentially for comps, because it sounds like you guys might have a little hotspot around you guys. I look forward to talking more about that. But to introduce you, Scott, Mr. Scott Alpiter Havok, multi-system player, been playing for 36 years. So you must have started mid-90s, like some of us old buggers.
80s, actually.
80s.
Yeah.
Even earlier than the old buggers.
I started on Photon, which is the original laser tag. The Baltimore Center opened up pretty shortly after Photon got its feet under it and started franchising. So it was, I've still got, I think, my original membership card somewhere, which is pretty hilarious because Photon, like an amusement park ride, used to have a sign that said, "You must be this tall to play games of Photon." And I got around that because my brother was already a player. So they allowed me to play even though I wasn't really tall enough. So my original member card picture, I'm, 8 or 9 years old. I'm, like barely 4 foot tall. And I've got this ridiculous oversized, I don't know if you've ever seen the Photon equipment, but we had a full helmet with a face shield and everything. So it's pretty funny to see my tiny little body, wearing this equipment. But yeah, so started playing at a very early age, but competitive came later, obviously.
For those of our listeners that don't know about Photon, so Photon was the very, very first system built by George Carter III. And if you want to hear an amazing story about that, go to Tivia's podcast, and she interviewed George Carter III, and I found that story fascinating about how they built it. They had to build everything with Faraday cages because people's like garage remotes would like set off the laser tag packs, and like they didn't have their own bandwidths and stuff like that. They were dealing with a whole bunch of issues that we don't have to worry about these days. It's absolutely fascinating. So you've been playing since those days, which is like you are OG. Like I'm not sure I've met a player that started that early, actually, out of all the podcasts we've done. So congratulations, Havok. You're officially the oldest player that we have, or the most longest running player. You've also played Lasertron. You've played in 7 countries. You specialised in Lasertron as well later after Photon completed. You got 5 US golds, 3 Swedish golds, 3 Minigeddon golds. I don't know what Minigeddon is, but I look forward to hearing a bit more about that later. 2 UK golds, and many other things. I had to stop, 3/4 of the way down the list, essentially. So yeah, big resume. Originally from Baltimore, and about to move closer to these two gentlemen into what appears to be a bit of a hotspot for laser tag in that area. So there's the introduction. I'm so pumped to be able to talk to you guys. Like, this is a conversation that I've been wanting to have for so many years, and finally we're here to share more about the different systems, because as I shared prior to the pod, most of our listeners have probably not played anything other than Zone or maybe Laser Force. Essentially in Australia and New Zealand, that's pretty much what you get. A few of us might have played Delta Strike socially or something like that, but that's pretty much it over here. So yeah, we're really interested to see actually how the sport plays on different systems, and a bit more about the formats and stuff. So, who's the best person to start and just give us a little bit of background on Armageddon, what actually it is, where do you play, what systems do you play on, just like the basic background of the tournament.
I think we're going to break that up
George
for you. So
to-
I'll handle what it is. So Armageddon is a multi-system tournament founded by our good friend Ricky Vega about 23 years ago now. So we took a couple years off for COVID and 1 year off for another thing, but for the most part, the tournament's been running consecutively since 2000. And his idea was just so Ricky was kind of the original multi-system player. Ricky, like myself, is originally a Photon player from the Dallas, Texas area where Photon was created. I don't remember if Ricky's home center was the original Photon center or not, but he, like myself, started playing in the late 80s. Immediately fell in love with, the adrenaline rush and the competition and everything. And like myself and George and Cope, and once you discover that there are other tags out there that you can compete in, if you're a competitive enough person, you just naturally kind of start playing those too. So Ricky ended up playing. He was a very accomplished laser trek player for a while, which is a system that pretty much just doesn't exist anymore. But he's also played Qzar and all these other things. So he had the wild idea, hey, why don't we get, a group of crazy people like me together and drive around from system to system for a few days and see who's the best at all of these together, and come up with a way to, objectively judge how everybody does on all the different systems. And at the end of those 2 or 3 days, we'll have a laser tag grand champion of sorts, So that's what we've been doing now for 23 years. It has grown and evolved. George will talk in a second about where we've been and things like that. But overall, that is that's the concept. Everybody's good at their own thing. Let's see how good we all are at everybody else's. And let's see who can adapt and, figure it out and use teamwork and, let's all get competitive and all support each other and learn about these different formats and systems.
Cool. Is it like a significant, we have a significant home ground advantage in laser tag in general. Is it like that playing on the home system? Is like we go to somebody's home, they really whoop some ass, and then it's like how well you do away from home. That's the real tester of who breaks free on the top of the ladder, so to speak.
Yeah, it's definitely like that, on only a little bit more pronounced. Instead of just a different layout of the arena, it's a completely different system and different how it plays in your strategy, where your targets are, the timing of the gun, everything is completely different. So the home system advantage is pretty big, but it's kind of for that reason that we have it spread across 8 different systems. So yeah, you might have a massive advantage in your system, but that's only 1/8 or 1/7 of the entire tournament. So what really counts is how well you can adapt to these other systems that you haven't played a lot before.
And do you get people training, like cross training a lot? So you get some players who are really serious who like to make sure they're good on 2, 3, 4 systems?
Yeah, where possible. But one of the problems that we have in the US, and I think we'll get to this later about having like a standardized system, is that different geographical areas tend to favor different systems. So when I started playing, my only option was Laser Storm. There was no other center around me. I would have to drive a few hours away to play something else. So Me in my area and an hour away in Pittsburgh, it's all mostly Laser Storm, and I don't have anything close enough to me that I can go and just play Zone whenever I want or Force. So I don't really have that opportunity to train on those systems like that. But in the bigger cities, that can be an option to a few of the players.
Yeah. Okay. So you must do a lot of traveling. So if the systems are really clumped together like that, then to get 8 systems across a whole bunch of days, you guys must drive like a long way. How does all that work?
Cope, you want to take this one?
Yeah. So to get to all these different systems, we do take a bus, so everyone's traveling together, and we do
Cool.
it over 3 or 4 days. Sometimes we import systems into a home center. So if we've got a really friendly operator there, they'll let us bring in some of these older systems that might not have a location nearby. Like we import Storm and Qzar typically, and set them up in that arena. So in one day we can get 3 different systems all within the same arena, and then the other ones, we specifically pick out locations in which we can get a good number of systems that are competitive arenas that host tournaments. This year, we're looking at the Syracuse to Philadelphia area. In the past, we've done the Long Island to Philadelphia. We've done Fort Wayne to Michigan, touching in Ohio. There's a couple of different hotspots that we really try and go to that have provided consistent routes with systems that are within 2 or 3 hours of a drive of each other.
That's so you guys just have like one big bus trip the whole way around. Like so all the players are on the bus together.
Yeah, so originally when we started, this was one of those live and learn kind of deals.
Yeah.
First of all, when we started this, we were all much younger and dumber than we are now. Definitely younger, but I would say dumber too. And I think George can vouch for that because he was there year one with me as well. And
Absolutely.
year one, we were all driving separately. And, inevitably, you've got cars that break down. You've got people that get lost. Shit, back in 2000, we didn't have Google Maps. We were like printing out, Christ, what was the name of the, I can't remember the name of
MapQuest.
it. Yeah, MapQuest. We were printing out MapQuest directions, literally. At the start of the tournament, we would hand out the schedule and the centers and the hotels that we were using on the different nights, and it would have directions on how to get from one center to the other. But you're driving around sleep deprived because you're playing tag all day and all night, and then you're partying in between because you only see these people once or twice a year. So it becomes a family reunion as much as it is a competition to a certain degree, and it definitely has now after 23 years. We've been to each other's weddings and parents' funerals and things like that. But yeah, so the bus came out of necessity, but it's one of those things that has really defined the tournament to a large degree because the camaraderie, the extension of the social scene, on a 3-hour ride instead of not, only talking to the people in your car or whatever, you can still talk to half the people at the tournament or more than that, depending on which bus you're on or whatever. And of course, there's drinking games and karaoke and, all the silliness that comes from 40 to 70 laser tag players getting together for 3 days at a time. It's a big part of what makes Armageddon so unique. And we've even got a favorite bus driver that we've had like 3 out of our 23 years at this point. Shout out Donna, if you're listening to us. She is a member of the Facebook group, so she might see this when we repost it. But yeah, it's a really cool experience.
It sounds just like awesome. Like I think having that social fabric as a foundation of a tournament, I think, is a key to success. So that's one of the the zone community. Australia's had a very successful scene over a long period of time. So we average usually 20 to 30, closer to 30 teams a year. We've had to put in a team cap for the Australasian Championships a couple of years ago, about 35. We've had as many as 37 teams. And it's very competitive, but in the early days, 99 was the first one. It was very much focused around the social side of things. So we'd have, there's always lots of gatherings. There's still a social night in the middle of the week where we just don't play laser tag. We just go out and have a drinks night, they call it. And yeah, that people come back each year partly because of the competition, but also partly because all their friends are there. And same thing, people go to each other's weddings, they've got somewhere to stay anywhere in Australia or New Zealand. So yeah, I think it's I can see why it's been such a successful tournament. That's the foundation of how it's all run. I think that it's a brilliant initiative to have a bus where you all get to travel together. Like, what an experience that would be. So let's get into the systems a little bit. So you guys say you play 8 systems. So let's talk about the systems that you guys specialize in. George, tell us about Laser Storm. Tell us about. I'm curious to know. Do you guys play? Tell us about the pack and how it plays, and then we'll get more into the game formats after that.
Okay, well, Laser Storm is different in that it has a headset that you wear where your targets are and a smaller gun. In fact, I got some.
I was going to say, George, you better have props.
Yeah, this is the gun that we play with, so it's quite a bit different than what you're used to. Instead of a trigger down there, you have a button on top. This is how we play. All right, it's got 2 barrels, so you've got red light that comes out of one side and the infrared that comes out of the other, and both sides can be hit. You got a headset sensors that have your front and back is where you're hit on. And the way we play traditional Laser Storm, not always in Armageddon, but in the way we play is a divided arena. So we have a 3-foot tall barrier that splits the entire arena in half, keeps 2 teams separate. So that I know that's completely different than what you're used to, but it does allow us to have a different playing style. And the way we have it set up for tournaments is when you're tagged one time, you have to go back to your base station and energize again. So this game has energizing and reloads. You start the game, you energize, you tag people, get tagged once, go back and energize again. So that kind of makes it a very position-based game where you go to take a position that's very strong on the field, and when your opponent hits you, they get a point for hitting you, but they also take over your position and force you out of it, and then you have to fight to get it back again. And we play, a player hit is 1 point, and a base is worth 5 points. So that's the gist of
two teams at a time?
Yeah, 2 teams at a time. And for tournaments, the way we play, it's 5 players on a team. We traditionally play with smaller arenas, so probably some of the smallest arenas in Armageddon would be Laser Storm. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess it might be a game akin to Capture the Flag, or in Zone they call it base flags, where you basically have to activate at your own home base, and then you score by getting points on the other base, but you also score by tagging players as well. So that's kind of one of the differences.
Yeah, bases can definitely swing the game, but a lot of it comes down to the individual player hits because that'll make up most of the score of the whole game.
Right. Yeah, okay. And can you cross the line? So there's a line in the arena, say blue versus red or whatever. Can they ever cross the line into the other colours?
No, you got to stay on your own side. It's not like a straight line down the center.
Yeah.
It's one of the things that we have is instead of a solid arena, there's a grid above us that hanging barriers hang from. So in that way, we can change the layout whenever we want. We tend to change it every 4 months or so, or right before a tournament, so that everybody's coming in, at least if you're a Storm player, to a level playing field when we play.
Yeah, I couldn't quite grasp, like, if you take somebody's position, but you can't go onto their side of the field, how that worked.
Right. So with it just being 5 players on a team, and because of the way the headsets are, more show and tell material. This is what the headset looks like, and these bulbs right here are where the sensors are. And so when you're wearing it, you can see that I can be hit right about where my eyes are. That means if you're behind a barrier and you're looking up like this, it can be very hard to hit you, though not impossible. So that means that a barrier that is about your standing height and you can just peek over and shoot, it becomes a strong barrier for you because the opposing team can't get behind you. So you have a relatively strong position right there where you can see a lot of the playing field, tag a lot of players. But when the other team takes your position, now not only can you no longer tag all of them, but that position is a similar position on their side where they can shoot all the players on your team.
Yeah. Okay.
So you're not taking the actual physical location, but you're essentially taking over the lane of fire.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Cool. Got it. And how long do the games go for?
We have them for 10 minutes.
10 minutes, and you must come out sweating. Like, is it a lot of work moving back and forwards to the reload?
Yeah, so I mean, you might reload depending on how you play. You might get hit 20 to 30 times a game. But like I said, we play in a small arena, so they're not
Yeah.
really that far away. But when we play at the higher level games, we are, we energize and get back very quickly. So they are very intense games. We sweat quite a bit, like you guys do.
They're allowed to
Yeah,
jump
yeah.
too, and a lot of
Ooh,
their
I'm
players,
interested.
yeah, a lot of their high energy play. Well, it's not a danger issue, right? When you have the divided arena, you don't have to worry about somebody being under your legs when you come down from that jump, because you're standing right against that barrier. You know that there's no safety issue. So a lot of the high energy players in Storm tend to jump a lot. So it's, for a tiny little arena, you would be surprised how many calories you can burn in the Storm game.
Mm. And you guys don't have the issues that we have with pack covering, no doubt, because the sensors are just here. Is that the only sensors you have, or do you have pack sensors as well?
We don't. There are versions of our system that have a chest sensor, but we do have some issues with it, but not like you guys do. It's not as bad.
What are the main? How do people cover their pack in Laser Storm?
You'll have people with really high elbows. They like to bring them up like this when they're playing. Can't do that. So
I'm not trying to get intel for when I come over or anything like that. Sounds like I'm getting my playbook down straight away. No.
Right. If you're another thing you do is you might look over the side of a barrier, and if you do, you're bending down, and if the arena design is in such a way that somebody can get behind you, they're shooting your ass instead of your headset. That's a call for covering too. So it's things like that. You can definitely cover on this system. It's just not quite as easy as where your chest is. You're naturally playing like this. You don't naturally have your hand up like this when you're playing.
Yeah, it's a bit easier to pick it out. So no doubt you guys have. Is it unanimous across every system? Challenges with reffing this game of laser tag?
Oh yes,
regardless of system and arena.
Yeah, some more than others, but yes.
It must be difficult going from 8 different systems where you're looking for 8 different things on each system. Talk to us about that a little bit. How do you overcome those kinds of challenges?
We use player refs just like everybody else does, and there's over the years we've developed a system that defines or guides which rule sets we use for any given system. I think that was one of the things that you wanted to talk about was the different settings that we use, and our basic guide is we try to go by whatever the popular team competitive format for any system is. We don't have to develop Armageddon rules for zone. We can print out the ZLTAC zone rules or whatever, and we can use those rules, sometimes modified a little bit here or there for Armageddon because team size might be different, or is different. Nobody else uses teams as big as we do in Armageddon at this point in any other system. So we have to change, the amount of, like in Laser Force, you have different roles for the different players. So we have to change the amount of roles that are involved, or we don't always have the scheduling to allow for playing, a full set on both sides like QZAR does, right? So we don't do that. So it's little modifications, but generally we go by the established rule set, competitive rule set from any given system, if there is one. Last year we tried to include Delta Strike in our tournament, and it did not go as planned. It was an unfortunate set of circumstances where the system and software had been installed just literally, hours before we got there to try to host a tournament there, essentially. But we were trying to do a cool thing. We were trying to include a new system and reach out to a possible other community that might exist out there of people who want to play competitive Delta Strike. So we just developed our own, settings based on what we thought would make sense from what we knew of the software and the arena. But we didn't end up getting to play it anyway. So,
is there a Delta Strike community? No. The irony of that is that they have amazing membership features, and they don't have a community. It's kind of It doesn't make any sense. But yeah, it just goes to show it's not about necessarily about the membership system. It's about whether I guess whether a community builds at least one or two locations. I guess you could play competitive tag on anything really if you put your mind to it. It just
Well, a lot of
requires
it also depends
big heads.
on the operator themselves. Like we have it upstrike by
Yep.
us, but they don't know how to run it at all. So, and I know the guy. He lets me have he lets me poke around the system to see if there's anything we can do. But there's a very limited selection on what you can do with the version that he has. So
Yeah.
there's not much, and I don't know if it's a feature of the system or not. But there's this weird quirk where when you're firing, it overrides all other sounds. So you might be hit, but you're not going to hear that because you're hearing the firing sound. And I don't
Yeah.
know if that's the way the system is or the way the settings are, and the operator just doesn't know how to change it.
Right.
So
Yeah. Okay.
things
Yeah.
like
I
that.
know
That
on Zone. Yeah, they went to quite a lot of trouble to be able to play 3 or 4 sounds over the top of each other at one time. It's like quite a bit of brain power required to figure that whole thing out. So yes, I can definitely see that some of the systems might not have put investment into that area, and it's interesting to look at different systems and what works and what doesn't work, so you can start to get a better picture of what's required actually to play competitively in a system, I guess. Cool. And just before we finish as well, George, tell us a little bit about the customization that you do. So I'm guessing you do customization on the Laser Storm packs.
um, a little bit on the packs, more or less the software. So
Yeah.
I've taken the code and redesigned it a little bit to add more features to it. A couple of different gameplay options, some member stats, things like that. As far as the hardware, I'm changing components to make it work a little bit better as much as I can. I'm messing around with 3D printed stuff, so I'm making my own headsets now.
Ooh, cool beans.
Yeah,
And what will they
so
be for selling to members to have their own headset kind of thing?
potentially, because one of the first things I did was I made a one that's bigger than normal because I have a few customers that they have bigger heads and they love it. It fits a lot better. So
Mm.
and potentially there's always been there's some people that have, I guess, smaller heads, and so when they put the headset on, the sensors go down a little bit lower than normal. So it's much easier
Mm.
for them to peek over barriers and shoot than it is for other people. And if I can customize that so that everybody's the same, it can make some players happier. Not
Yeah,
the
that's
ones that have that
interesting, hey?
advantage already, but
Yeah. So, like, I've always found it interesting. I know in Zone, like, one of the ways we've made it different to other sports, like paintball, everybody customizes their guns, right? But in laser tag, in Zone, everybody has the same equipment. That was one of the things. But on Laser Storm, it's you need to actually have some level of customization to make it fair. It's an
right.
interesting one. In terms of the head shape thing, like, I can totally see how that would be a thing where the sensors are dropped down and then they've got an advantage peaking over half heights. So. Yeah, awesome, man. Well, yeah, that's really cool that you do all that. I wish you the best on all that, and I hopefully can come over one day and actually play on it. I'd, yeah, really love to have a look at that. Sean, your turn, mate. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Laser Blast?
So Laser Blast is fairly similar to Zone. It grew out of a site that originally had Zone. Laser Blast is a company started in '97. You got a triangle front sensor, looks kind of similar to Zone's V4, V5 Q series equipment. Shoulder sensors, back sensors, and then a similar phaser as well. The way we play Blast is much slower shot speed than anything else. It's one shot every 2 seconds for our competitive format. So the even slower version of US zone compared to Australia, New Zealand zone speeds.
Mm.
Uh,
Mm.
we play an elimination game that is somewhat similar to base flags. The base is the main objective. You get hit once and you have to go back to your base area. But then there's also only 15 lives until you're eliminated. So it's a combination of base flags and elimination all in one game with 2 teams in the arena.
Yeah, awesome. That sounds really fun, actually. Yeah, and looks. Do you have Zone players that play it, given that it's similar to the old Zone systems?
So the Blast scene isn't as active anymore. They've come out with a new system, Cyber Blast, which doesn't play quite the same. It's got some of those transition things, and some of the sites that we had in Michigan that were real hotspots for our tournament scene have switched over to other systems. So we're not as active in the Blast scene, but as a result, quite a few people have transitioned from Blast to Zone. Sugar Daddy Jake Chase being one of the good ones that has won some U.S. golds, was formerly a Blast player, and a few other ones. Ty Wynn, who's gone to Sweden, and we've got quite a few people that have transitioned from Blast to Zone.
And is it does the pack clip up at the front, or is it over the head?
Over the head, clips on the side for the one that I'm familiar with, and then Cyberblast, their newer one, clips in the front with like a magnetic clip.
Oh, cool. Okay. And what's the phaser like? Is it bigger or smaller than a Zone? Like let's say a Helios, if you know what Helios system is, or
Yep, it's right in between the Helios phaser and the old Zone V4 Q2 phasers. It's
Cool.
right in between those two.
Yeah. Sounds like it'd be I could see why players would have transitioned easily to Zone.
Yep.
Yeah, very very similar kind of setup by the sounds of things. Cool. And the game style you play, that's really really interesting as well. A limb style, but base flag style, but it's with an elimination as well. And how long do the games typically go for?
Typically a 12-minute game. For Armageddon, we have to shorten it a little bit for the schedule, but 12-minute game.
And two 5-person teams in the arena at a time?
Yep.
Cool. And one shot every 2 seconds. So it's so we played this for the first time when we played the Europeans. They play their elimination on one shot every 2 seconds. And the counterintuitiveness of it is that you actually get more dynamic play with a slower firing rate.
Yep.
Because you get less situations where you've got two people on either side of the panel who can't approach themselves. All you got to do is bait that one shot, and you've got enough time to get there. So I can see why you do it. I love it. I think it's great. We go on the opposite way in Australia. We play 2 shots a second, but it's completely different format. And you guys probably know Moomin. Do you guys know of Moomin from in the Zone community in Europe?
Yeah.
Come and play the US Nationals. He came over recently. He brought a team from Europe to play ours. He said, "Look, perfect, legitimate format, completely different to ours. You know, that's the thing. You need to pulling out individual parameters by themselves don't give you much of an idea. You've got to see the format in its entirety and play it, don't you, to see how it works." It sounds great. And do you guys have is there a bigger proportion of players from one particular system, or do you have how many people go to Armageddon firstly? Typically, how many people participate?
Go ahead, Sean.
40 to 50.
George?
Yeah.
Depends on the
Usually
year.
anywhere.
We've the first year, George, we had 5 teams the first year.
5 teams of 5 players.
Right, and team sizes were smaller back then too. We've had teams where we've had 8, right? Or years where we had 8 teams, or 9. Didn't we have?
Yeah, I think our most was 9.
And we learned that 9 is the breaking point.
Too much.
Yeah, because you're doing so much.
8.
Yeah.
So it really depends on the year, and that partially depends on what part of the country we're in. We don't, because we change where we play, we don't have the same set of systems every year, right? So. Like Photon has been a part of Armageddon in the past, but there are no Photons available anymore. Laser Quest was a staple of Armageddon for a long, long time, but now there's only one laser tag in the country. So unless we play in Ohio, we can't include that, Like I said, Laser Trek, I think there's one Laser Trek center in the country anymore.
Okay.
So it's not just a matter of are there systems there? Is the arena large enough to field, 8-on-8, 16 players at a time, plus a couple player refs out there? And do they have enough working equipment that we can have a full 8-on-8 plus have, 4 to 8 extra packs for those inevitable pack issues that come up in the time that we're there, putting these packs through the gauntlet, playing them harder than they've been played in the last 3 months, So it really depends on the year. We've had years where probably half the tournament was made up of Laser Storm players. We've had other years where a third of the tournament was made up of Laser Quest players. It really just depends on the year and where we're playing and who decides to show up and what team captains decide to show up and put teams together.
Yeah, right. Okay. And you get this situation where sites convert into other systems as well. So you've got players that have played across multiple systems and they might have played a lot of something and now they play a lot of something else. And so, I guess, I can see how it would move around a bit based upon that and what you're sharing about having to move to different locations or different regions, I guess, to play. So tell us a bit about your system, Lasertron, mate. Is it Lasertron still part of everything?
Yeah, so Lasertron does not have much of a standalone competitive scene anymore. They do have a couple of centers that do kind of some in-house competitions. There's some debate in the community as to whether or not those constitute real tournaments or not. We don't need to get into that, but for all intents and purposes, the Lasertron tournament scene is no longer. But Lasertron is still a viable system. There are still plenty of centers out there that have good Lasertron equipment, and they're large enough arenas that we can use. So generally, I think Lasertron's been included every year for the last, I don't even know, probably 14, 16 years. It's been a long time since we haven't had Lasertron. So yeah, it is generally a part of Armageddon. Lasertron is another standard vest system, both shoulders, front and back, and then gun sensor as well, or phaser sensor as well. The main format, or kind of the highlight team format of Tron. So at our World Championships, much like Zone, we would play a lot of different formats, but kind of our team comp format, our big deal format was what we called chips. So chips is a game format where there are three different modes. There's stealth mode, where your pack goes completely dark, doesn't make any sound. You can walk around the arena, the theory being you can walk around the arena more, stealthily and sneak to where you want to be or whatever. It was a pretty useless game mode, honestly. Most of us used it to be decoys. Like if somebody like me got stealth, I would run into the base just so that 5 of the players from the opposite team would go, Havok's in the base, Havok's in the base, and run back towards me and disrupt their play. But it really wasn't a big game changer. The other two were huge game changers and huge point swings. So you had Energizer mode. So just like Storm, it's a system where you have to go back and re-energize when you're out of either shots or lives, right? So you get, and I'm the worst. I played this system for so long and I won so many tournaments and I still don't know the numbers, but I want to say it was 60 shots and 15 lives is what chips was. So if you run out of shots or lives, you have to go back and re-energize. Or if someone on your team is in Energizer mode, they can put 1 shot into you and you come back with all your lives and all your shots in that 1 shot. And then Deactivator was the opposite of that. Deactivator mode, instead of me having to shoot you 15 times to deactivate you and send you back to the Energizer, I only had to hit you once, and I would take all of your lives with that 1 shot. So, if each shot is worth 50 points, then all of a sudden I get a 750-point swing by hitting you that 1 time instead of having to hit you all 15 or whatever, There were bases. Bases were worth 250 points, I want to say. They were not shielded, so if you got to the base unopposed, you could... So Tron is a rapid-fire system. If you hold down one of the buttons on the front of the gun, you'll fire a single shot. If you hold down both buttons, you can just hold the trigger down, and it'll fire a shot off. I want to say it was roughly around 2.5 shots a second, something like that. It's a pretty fast rapid-fire mode. So you could unload your clip into a base in a matter of seconds and rack up, 250 points times 60 shots if the other team didn't get back. So throughout the time of the game, and I want to say our games were 10 minutes, sounds right. It's been a long time since I played real chips, unfortunately, because the scenes kind of know more. But so the first 30 seconds of the game, there would be no chips, and then it would say, chips mode activating, Energizer activating now. And 2 of the 8 players on the field would get Energizer mode. And then after the chip goes away, there'd be 30 seconds off. And then again, it would say stealth mode activating now. And 2 players that didn't get that last chip would then get the stealth mode. And then, again with deactivator mode. Now, it didn't necessarily cycle back through in the same order the next time. So there's a certain amount of strategy and tactic and paying attention to who got the chips on your team, also who got the chips on their team. You could actually see on the scoreboard. So in Tron, we had scoreboards that we could that were at the energizers. So every time you went back, you could get a score check, but you could also see, oh shit, Cope and Icarus are deactivator mode. They're upstairs, and you could then communicate that to your team. So heavy team base, heavy on communication, a lot of tactic in that, you don't want to advance up too far. If you've only got 5 shots left, you want to kind of drop back and be close to that re-energizer and have somebody on your team then move up and take over your position. It was a real fun system. It still is a real fun system. Unfortunately, we just don't have a lot of places to play it at that high level now.
Do you get the same ability? Does each team get the same number of each ability?
Yes. So every minute when those chips come on, both teams get stealth mode. Both teams get deactivator. Yes.
Yeah. So there's no random chance things where people have an advantageous draw of chips or anything like that. Both teams get the same.
Right. Well, but there is the random chance of who gets the chip, right? Like I am a more aggressive player. I'm a more in-your-face dogfighter. I'm probably on the enemy side of the field, right? So if I get stealth mode, that's a bummer. That's a bummer for me, but it's also a bummer for my team because there's not a giant point swing that I can initiate with that stealth mode. But if I get deactivator mode or energizer mode, that's a completely different story. So there is a certain amount of that, and there were definitely, at the highest level of Tron, there were definitely plans within plans of, okay, well, if this person gets deactivator, we do this, but if that person gets it, we do that,
Yeah.
So there was a lot of on-the-fly changes and, adaptation.
And ultimately, when you're preparing, if you do train or prepare between tournaments, you're training to round your team out to try and get have a greater number of your teammates be able to do more of the roles at an elite level, so to speak.
Sure.
Okay, so there's something to work towards. Cool. Yeah. And what did the phaser look like?
Tron phaser. I wish I had one with me. It's stubby. Compared to say it was kind of like snub nose. Do you have a golden phaser, George, that you can show him? One of the formats that we had at our World Championship. The prize for winning the format, you would get a golden phaser, so they would take phaser shells and paint them gold. And George, it's one of George's prize laser tag possessions. He loves the dumb thing. I mean, it is cool. I'll give it to him. It was definitely, when I won my first one, it was definitely one of the cooler things in my trophy case. No, you don't have it? Okay.
No, I have my own Tron system, but I thought I had a phaser here, but apparently I don't.
Fair. It's similar to a Laser Force phaser, I would say, in kind of size. Cope, is that fair?
Yeah, roughly the same dimensions. You do have 2 buttons on the front of it that you have to press and hold. So rather than like a heat sensor or anything like that, physical buttons that you have to kind of pinch in order to fire at rapid fire.
And I guess kind of the last interesting thing to note for Tron is that one of the more unique rule sets that we allowed was you were allowed to hold a lean as long as you wanted and as extreme as you wanted. So, yeah. I'm sure you've played against people that do that illegally in zone and know how difficult it can be when somebody's shoulders are already, all of a sudden behind their legs. And their front and back are twisted as such so that they're pointing up at the ceiling or down at the floor. We allowed that. So it presented a completely different skill set than a lot of the other systems did.
Where are the hit zones?
Shoulders and chest and back.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the game works. So when you say bending over, you mean people bending over forwards over the 45 degrees, and then
There you go.
that's
George is
that's
wearing a pack now.
Ooh.
Yeah, that's an old Tron pack. That's system 10.
Yeah,
cool.
but I don't have the phaser, so.
Oh, well. But yes.
What does the back look like, George? Can I see the back?
It's not fitting right. But...
Right. So the chest and the back look similar
Yes.
in terms of their shape.
Yep.
Yep.
And I believe.
Cool. And where are the sensors are in the
sensors.
white strips? The clear strips there on the left and right. That's where the sensors are.
No.
Right here are the sensors.
Yeah. If that
Shoulders and somewhere in the front here and the back.
Yeah.
In the middle of the front, middle of the back kind of thing.
Basically. On the clear
So
clear shells, you can see them, and even on that smoky shell, if you were close enough to it, you could see where the IRs are.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So you can kind of bend over and still get hit easily, essentially.
Yes. It evolved a very close style of play.
Right.
The best of us at the late stage Lasertron, because there was an early Lasertron competitive scene in like the late 90s in Texas that Ricky was a part of that then died off. And then it kind of was reborn on the East Coast when a bunch of old Photon players, basically they put up a $10,000 cash tournament and a bunch of us that had stopped playing laser tag went, oh, I guess we're going to go play laser tag again. And we went and won a bunch of money playing laser tag.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, in Zone, you might have seen the Lord of the Rings game that they play, where they play with no arena, and it's just basically dodging. Yeah. So the guys that are good at that, which is okay, not me, is they play very closely together. So it's as a way of dodging. So was there a lot of dodging in Lasertron? Is that what you do? Is get close and then turn as people will reactivate?
Yeah, leaning and dodging, and a combination of the two. It ends up looking very Matrixy.
Cool.
I'm pulling my shoulders back away from you, and taking my shoulder way far away, but also firing up in front of my chest at you while I'm doing that.
Is there footage on YouTube?
Oh gosh. There is a absolutely terrible 1v1 that you may have seen before with two of my old buddies, one of which was one of my teammates. Yeah, it has been run through the internet ringer over the years of people just ripping this thing apart. That is Lasertron, and that is kind of how we played, but not exactly. One of those guys, my buddy Cyberwolf, had a very specific style of play. Nobody else really played like that. So it's not a very good representation. I was there in that room screaming for them to turn the lights off, telling them it looked terrible, but they didn't listen to me. And George was there too, I think.
I wasn't there.
Oh, no, you weren't there for that? It must have been
I'm denying it.
But yeah, it was. So you can see some footage for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Well, maybe we need to bury that into the internet with more footage or something.
I would appreciate it.
Yeah. Somebody brought it to my attention and said, "Check this out," with a big smile on their face, and I was like, "Oh yeah, thanks for that. Appreciate that." Yeah, it's the constant battle with laser tag, right? Trying to demonstrate to people that it's a worthwhile way to spend your discretionary time. So we need as much good stuff on the internet as possible.
Yes.
There is a video from a couple years ago for Armageddon where we had a filmer come and stay the entire tournament with us. That turned out to be a pretty good preview of what Armageddon is. There's some videos floating around from that.
Yeah, that's a good point, Sean.
Actually,
you can use that footage to see Tron and several other systems and how they're played at a high level for sure.
That'd be awesome. If you send me that, Sean, then I'll put it in the show notes, the podcast, and people can have a click and check it all out, including myself.
Yeah.
Awesome. And so are you guys, so who kind of is the zone representative in the Armageddon community? Do you guys have one? Do you guys just kind of figure out zone? How does it fit in? How does zone fit in?
Specifically have representatives from each community. We do have a number of players that come from each system. Skywalker, who I believe is the US Zone World Rep, is attended Armageddon and played in multiple years. So he's been out to Armageddon. We've had other players at the top end of the US Zone scene come out. We usually have a few each year, but there's no specific representative for each system.
Yeah. And so what system do you play? What format do you play when you play Zone?
We play team comp with 3 teams in the arena.
Do you play base evacuation on?
Yep.
Yep. One shot a second?
Yep.
Stuns on?
Yes, well, as long as the equipment will allow it.
Right.
Oh, okay. Which system doesn't have stuns? I'm just trying to think.
I believe.
Well, the one
Infusion.
the one that we just played in Fort Wayne for the Battle for the Fort has stuns, but the points don't work the way stun points are supposed to work. So yeah, that's always been. I've loved Zone since the first time I played it, and I started playing back when it was the V4 days. And one of the big frustrations as a person who loves Zone in the States is every center you go to has a different format, a different, pack set, a different timing. It can be very frustrating to, get in good zone practice because the different centers don't have the same equipment, and you get that zone timing down, and then you go play on Helios 2, or you go play, and all of a sudden that timing is different again. So it can be very frustrating, but also very fun, because it's just an additional challenge to get used to. We're used to that kind of stuff as multi-system players anyway. But yeah, it would be nice if all the competitive zone, centers in the U.S. had the same equipment and software, but they don't.
Yeah, we have the challenge in Australia or in Australasia about whoever's got the new system first often dominates the scene for a couple of years. And we went to H2 this year, and the home site Hobart are the only site that have it, and they'd only had it for 6 months, but that's all you need. Just need 3 to 6 months to get that timing down. Fraction of a second faster than everybody else, and they absolutely cleaned up. So so I can imagine what it's like coming from a different. Whole different system as well. Cool. All right. So just to wrap up about Armageddon before we get into some big picture stuff, because I'm going to ask you guys some more of your philosophical laser taggy questions, because I'm really curious to hear from another community about how they think about the sport and the game and things like that. But before we do, just tell us a bit about when the next Armageddon is and whereabouts you'll be playing.
The next Armageddon is going to be June 28th through July 1st. It's going to be in the Syracuse, New York to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania area. And it's going to be a draft this year. So rather than standardized set teams that we have in advance, we're going to be doing a draft tournament. And players will be drafted the day of the tournament so that we can mix up the scene, allow people to learn from other people, and really diversify what people are playing with and who they're playing with.
That's cool. And did you have some skewed results the last few years that prompted this?
So this is a pet project of mine. I've been trying to get Armageddon to have a draft year for roughly a decade now, maybe a little bit longer. No, there was nothing in particular that forced this to happen. But there, just like in any tournament scene, competition stagnates after a while. There are certain players and certain combinations of players that when they're put together, you can kind of look at the rosters of the different teams that are going to be in attendance and just naturally know who's winning gold, know who's winning silver. Last year was actually the complete opposite of that to a large degree. At least for a lot of people. I was somebody who was not particularly surprised by the results, but most people in attendance were. Sean took a team of very inexperienced, not only inexperienced Armageddon players, but overall inexperienced laser tag players. Most of them had only played tournaments from their own scene, hadn't been playing for very long, hadn't even necessarily won any large competitions in their scene. And Sean put them together, and in kind of a down year for talent, where we didn't have a lot of, more experienced and more decorated teams and players show up. They, used teamwork and some unorthodox strategies and thinking outside the box to, beat us old guys up and steal the gold medal. So um, it wasn't really that, anything happened last year that we were like, okay, enough's enough. But it's been my belief for a long time that, the best way to knock down those walls, whether they be between the systems or between the social cliques or whatever, is to get people to play together, right? I've taken that initiative on my own and gone out and done it. I've played zone tournaments, quest tournaments, storm tournaments, but most players need that. They need to know that they've got somebody friendly in that crowd when they get there. And maybe playing with 2 zone players on their Armageddon team this year will be that extra little momentum they need to then go to a Fort Wayne event or an event at Penn Salem next year. All of these tag scenes took a hit during COVID, but they've also taken a hit because of video games. And I know I'm starting to get into some of the philosophy stuff now, but it all kind of it feeds into itself, because that's the main reason why I want to do this, to hopefully raise the talent level, but to also create some new social connections as well, so that people will be more likely to branch out from their own system, their own scene, and go support a forced tournament that's a state away, or make the trip to Australia or Sweden or wherever. That's one of the coolest things that laser tag has given all of us. I think we'd all agree is I've got a dozen different people I can call up and say, I want to come to Sweden next month. Can I stay with you for 3 days? And they'll say, absolutely. And that really it opens up your possibilities, and it opens up your mind too. So that's the goal of the draft this year, is to, I've talked to some international players for years and years. There's some Tron players in Austria that I met when I went and played the first European Lasertron Championship. And they've wanted to come play Geddon now for like 8 or 9 years, but they can't get a full team to come do it, So now 2 or 3 of those players, hopefully, Matthias, if you're watching, I'm talking to you, can come do it, and come experience it, and then go back to their, country and say, man, we got to do this ourselves, or you got to go next year, or what are the other centers in this city, because a lot of times people just don't know. They've never looked.
Yeah, there's 2 things I love about it, and the first one is what you just spoke about, the fact that 1 or 2 people can basically join a team without having to get a whole 5 from their home location. So it's just going to hopefully bring in those dribs and drabs from all over the place. And then, of course, it feels like it fits in with the social side of what Armageddon's about. So it's just, it means that you sign up, you're going to, like I presume the draft system also means that the talent's going to be pretty spread out. So theoretically, if you get 9 teams, all 9 teams should hopefully have a crack at being able to final, for example, or I'm not sure how it works, but rank well, I guess. So it doesn't matter, even if you've got 1 or 2 players from your home site, you don't know how you're going to go, you can probably bank you're going to be allocated to a team that's going to be, be balanced with all the other teams. So yeah, that's really cool. Okay, and I will definitely, please reach out to us as you're approaching. And do you guys do live streaming or anything for the tournament?
Yeah, I've been doing it for the past 2 or 3 Armageddons. There are a lot of difficulties in doing it in an Armageddon tournament because you only have
so hard
4 or 5 hours at a center, and I have to set up all the streaming equipment in like a half hour. And so the streaming quality is not the best. It's the best that I can do with what I've got. But yeah, we have been streaming it. I have a Twitch feed that I stream it on.
And do you have any sites that have cameras? Are you able to tap into the camera systems of any of the locations, or is it pretty much just scoreboards, or is it just commentators? How do you?
So there's a few centers that we can tap into, like the zone we played to last year in Ben Salem.
Yeah.
They have cameras already in there, and he's like, here's the feed, and I just tapped into it, and we could use that. But most other centers don't have that, so I have a bunch of cameras that I bring, and it's a matter of if I can set them up in the arena in time, if I can run wires to them, or if they have a Wi-Fi signal I can use, because like Zone, they don't like using any Wi-Fi in the arena because it can mess with the packs. So there's a lot of those type of constraints. If I can't get a camera in the arena, either wired camera or a phone, then yeah, it's out in the lobby and we take a capture of the screen, hopefully with a direct line, but sometimes with a camera on the screen, and then it's just a picture of my face, and hopefully I can attract somebody to help commentate with me, because as a player, I'm playing the games and doing it too. So
Yeah, you really want a team of people, hey, that all kind of chip in and duck into the streaming room every now and then to kind of keep it going.
yeah,
have you guys tuned into the Australasian Championships stream?
yeah.
I have not watched that one. I've watched a lot of the different streams. I've even commented on some. I actually went and hung out the first German nationals. I just happened to be in Germany at the time. I didn't have a team to play with, but I went and visited those guys, and I sat at the microphone for a few minutes and just the random American that walked in and decided to start telling people about Zone. But yeah, I tend to watch, so I know a bunch of Swedish players, so I tend to watch Swedish streams when they're around, and I'll tend to watch the US streams when they're around as well.
Yeah, it's they've done some really good work. They've been working at it now since about 2018. So 2017 was the first time we kind of switched on the scoreboard and started talking into a microphone over the top of the events. And then 2018, we got a little bit more advanced, and they've just been working at it. And this year, the gentleman, Wamfox, who's developed all the stream, he has been working at it for a couple of years now, and he got player cards involved. And so at the start of every game, the player cards flipped over and the faces of the players that were playing the game showed up, and transition screens going, and the little worm at the bottom of the screen, and they're with cameras. So yeah, they do a really good job, and they have a schedule set up. So we have about 200 players that play, and then people put their hand up for any volunteer team. So you might want to volunteer as a ref or in the commentary team or whatever, and people generally volunteer somewhere, and then they so they have a schedule of commentators that go through. So it's definitely would recommend tuning into it. But please, as you approach the tournament and you get more links and stuff like that, please reach out, because we'd love to promote what's going on over there for Armageddon. And it'd be great to see a little Aussie contingent come over and represent as well, because if we got there, we'd definitely be it sounds like there'd be plenty of content to create and share with the world.
For sure.
All right, so let's get on to the little bit more big picture-y stuff now. Question I had for you guys, and anybody can, I would love to hear from all three of you, actually, one at a time, of course. So people are going to ask the question, wouldn't it be better to standardize the system we play on in order to progress the sport? So what's your position on this and why?
So it really depends on what we're looking at when we define progress the sport. If we want to become popular online, get more players, it's completely different than if we wanted to become an Olympic sport or to become a televised sport. So I think we really have to focus on what the priority is for growing laser tag. Standardizing would be critical for us to become an Olympic sport or anything like that, which is far off goal. But even becoming more popular, I don't think standardizing is going to solve the popularity of laser tag. It's more of one of those things that we need to do to get a certain level, but it's not the next level of popularity.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say in thinking about it after reading that we would discuss it, I think of it more as here in the United States, we've got Major League Baseball, we've got the NFL, we've got the NBA, we've got so. To me, I think of the systems as different sports. Yes, it is all under the general umbrella of laser tag, and there are a lot of transferable skills, right? If you're a good tactician, if you're good at keeping your opponent in between you and your teammate, if you're a good communicator, if you're a good whatever, if you're athletic, right? There's lots of different transferable skills, but just like a baseball player is not necessarily a good football player, but they're still both great athletes. That's how laser tag is, right? And back in the day, there was a news group called Alt Sport Laser Tag, right? And that's where a lot of us met before we met in person, because we were all there waving our flag for our system. We were saying Photon's the best, or Tron is the best, or whatever is the best. And let me tell you, that didn't get the community anywhere. You know, the people that are still around and playing in the U.S. for the most part, to a large degree, it's us. It's Armageddon players. It's people that 20 years ago realized that a rising tide raises all ships, and that, in order for tag to grow overall, there was no benefit to being gatekeepers or being elitist about what we were doing or how we were doing it. Even in the zone community, right? There's different hardware, there's different software. So you're not going to tell any of those players that they're lesser zone players, right? The more evolved of us, people like are going to recognize it's a different skill set, and you're either built to appreciate a challenge like that and walk towards it, or you're not. Some people come and play Armageddon 1 year and they don't have a great time in the arenas. They have a great time socially, hanging out and partying with all of us. But some people aren't built to get their ass kicked at 5 systems and then just really, savor that one system where they get to, kind of turn around and dole the pain back out. But those of us that do and have made it a point to go to these other systems are better tag players because of it. And we've got a richer social network because of it as well. Everybody on this podcast has played a tournament at Georgia Center. We've all played tournaments together and against each other on 3 or 4 different systems now, and I would argue that what we gain from building the community overall of people who look at laser tag as a worthwhile sport or athletic endeavor or whatever you want to call it, the better off we are. So that outweighs any benefit that we would have from everybody being able to walk into any laser tag center and have it be the same. Because I like vanilla, you like chocolate, right? Like I don't want to tell anybody that everything should be vanilla from here on out.
Yeah. The analogy I say to people when they talk to me about playing Laser Force competitively and what's the difference playing Zone competitively. These are people in my family and stuff that ask about it. Is that I use the same analogy where it's like it's basically like soccer and basketball, right? They both use a ball and the ball goes around the court, but the games are like completely different. Or rugby league and rugby union, like they both look like rugby, but one's played slightly different to the other. And laser tag's kind of like that on steroids. It's there's 8 different ways we could play this kind of thing that's kind of the same, but they are ultimately different sports or different games. And it doesn't mean they can't coexist, but one of the things I believe is a big challenge for us is the thing that we need to overcome is distribution of the game, being able to play it in more places. And what you guys are doing with building community is how that happens, because quite often site operators aren't focused, nor should they be, because George, as a site operator, you'd know the birthday parties keep the lights on, and you get to play a little bit of legal competition as a that's the side act really for every operator. It has to be, because that's the sporting side of it doesn't really pay the bills. So if we can build our community out, then you've got more people out there that can partner or work with side operators or run tournaments, or you need figureheads in different areas, don't you, to be able to spawn new communities essentially. So a big part of what the Laser Sports Academy, part of our goals is to facilitate that, which I think probably what you could see and why you reached out, is the more that we can build the community out, the more knowledge we can spread, the more people are going to be able to spawn new communities on whatever system. It doesn't really matter, because they're going to have to work what they got, right? Even if they do have a preference, they're going to have to work whatever's in their area, essentially. How about you, George? Do you have any kind of philosophies in this area?
I touched on it earlier when I said that, at least here in the United States, everything is so spread out and there's no one dominant laser tag system. There's just so many different systems out there. And so not any one took over to become the standard. And there's no governing authority to say that the standard is going to be. So as an operator myself, there's nobody coming to me and saying, hey, we should all turn to Force now, or we should all turn to something else. So as long as the different communities are going to exist, and we can't stop that from happening, they do exist. I have always seen Armageddon as like it's above the individual competitions. So the individual competitions like Laser Storm and Zone, they have a higher level of play at that system. So the games are going to be much more intense in the finals of those systems. But the overall skills that you have that you get to show off at Armageddon, I think it's more like the Olympics of laser tag, where
Mm,
the gold there means a little bit more than the gold on an individual system. Because
mm,
for me, Laser Storm, it's never going to be a huge system worldwide, even though it's still, they're still being manufactured, they're still being made right now. Um, the system itself isn't going to be bigger than, say, a Zone is going to be, or a Force. But the players, if they could all work together in a community, can be much bigger than one single system could ever be by itself. And that's what
mm.
I think the benefit of something like Armageddon is, where it can bring from multiple communities to become bigger.
Yeah, I love that. I love the idea that even if one system does start to kind of take over or build its like popularity up, that this is Armageddon's always going to have its place, isn't it? Like it's special in that way. Um, okay, so just to wrap up today, guys, we're coming to a close pretty shortly. For each of you guys, in your opinion, what does progress in laser sporting look like? And what are our next steps? Sean, would you like to start?
Yeah, more people playing would be progress for sure. The more people we can get to come out to tournaments, more people that we can get in Armageddon, single system tournaments, whatever it is, that's a win for laser tag. I think getting people out is what it really matters. And trying to grow more sites would be nice, but getting players out is the best thing.
Yeah. I got definitely George.
I
Sorry.
think a lot of it is about messaging. Recently, with all the people doing podcasts and streaming, it's letting other people see what we do. Because before this, there'd be communities of QZR players in a certain group would never know about any of the other outside community. And even if they did know about it, they didn't see it. It wasn't real to them. It was, we know there's some people play this other system somewhere else, but nobody ever investigates it. Nobody goes to see what it's about. But with all these channels and streaming, people can see it, see what it's about, and maybe, hopefully, participate.
It's kind of funny, hey, because if you think about it, we have each system might have a couple of hundred like regular players globally, right? And when you add them all up, if we've probably got we've got a community of a few thousand people if you put it
Yeah.
all together. But separately, we're actually like micro communities, but together we're actually like a reasonable sized community. So yeah, exactly like you said, the more we can cross those have those bridges meet, the bigger the community becomes essentially.
Yeah, I would just echo what George said, and that's why I reached out to you. That's why I love what you're doing, what the guys at the Resupply podcast are doing in the Laser Force community. Shout out to Laurie, what Tuvia is doing with her podcast speaks to a much broader and more general audience than any of these single system podcasts do. But also people like Moomin and Luke and Jason. That are behind the scenes and trying to make things happen here in the U.S. And yeah, we are few in our own individual systems, but we are many across the world. And there's also so many kids out there. And I say kids, I mean people, kids at heart like us that are playing laser tag when they're in their 40s. That love laser tag. Absolutely love it and have no clue that there's a competitive scene out there. They've seen paintball on ESPN and they know that exists, but the amount of obviously most of the people in my life know about laser tag because I've been doing it for 30 years. When I go away on vacation, they're like, "What are you playing now?" But
Yeah.
there are a ton. I've got to believe that there are a ton of people out there that watch Twitch, they watch YouTube, that are going to come across these videos. Our buddy Nathan, right, Micro. How many hours of laser tag footage online has Micro watched in his life? and that was before there were these unified voices that were going out of their way to try to reach out to each other. He was just finding this stuff on his own. I've got to believe there's more people out there, and I've got to believe that if we continue to, make this community more inclusive in everything that we do, and really make it a point to lift each other up. It doesn't matter if I'm coming to your tournament or not. I should, talk about it, post about it, let other people know about it, right? Because somebody might see that post through my link that they didn't see your link or whatever. So, I think the streaming, the advancement in the scoreboards that you guys came up with, we used that in Fort Wayne a couple of weeks ago, and it was awesome. We brought I brought 3 Storm players who had never played a zone tournament before, and they loved the additional information of like the hit streaks and comp, how many times people got comped or whatever. Having that additional information, seeing their picture up on the screen, being able to message their friends and say, hey, like, not only can you watch what I'm doing, but you'll actually be able to understand it. There's somebody talking about it. I think the commentators are huge, but I also think there's a big space that we haven't tapped into yet of going back to tournament footage and breaking it down, and talking about what this team did here or didn't do here and what that meant in that game, so that people can, not just keep playing tag, but get better at it, right? Because I think one way to get more people interested is to keep increasing the level that we play at and making it a better product for people to want to get involved with.
Yeah. Have you guys seen the technology? We interviewed Popeyes from New Zealand and the player tracking technology that him and VDark have created. That's an exciting thing that they're developing, and that should be in play for the Zone Worlds in New Zealand next in 2024, November. So, yeah, that's just another layer to that, what you're talking about, being able to analyse games. We've noticed in Australia the level accelerated very quickly after we started streaming, because people can watch back their games. So you finish your games for the day, you go back, you watch with your team, you can see what other teams are doing. Like the skill gap from day to day at Nationals now closes each day. People have that opportunity to go home, process, sleep on it, get up the next day, replan. Like suddenly everybody's learning curves go like this, and the level of strategy on top of that to be able to, if you do have something up your sleeve, especially if you're a home site, you've got to really hold on to it until it's the right time to do certain things. And I guess the whisper now is the next level in probably the Australasian community and potentially worlds is to have a coach, somebody who can just sit there and process content all day long, and especially when these player tracking software comes in. So there's plenty of people that care a lot about this game in all different communities and are putting a lot of time and energy into it. And yeah, it's been very inspirational and awesome to speak to you guys as one faction, as well as Luke and Invalid and Archangel that I spoke to last week. And there's just these groups everywhere that are doing stuff. So it's been an absolute honour and pleasure to talk to you guys today. Is there any final words or anything you'd like to share before we finish up for the day?
Who wants to go?
Just thank you.
I want to thank you, Ben, honestly, for this opportunity to get the word out there to, we've had Armageddons in Sweden, we've had them in the UK, they know about us in France and Italy and Austria, but I don't think there's much of a buzz about us in Australia. And we would love to get some Aussies to come over here and show us how to play zone their way. And, Sean and I, you can catch us at different US zone tournaments, and occasionally I show up at an international zone tournament. So I think there's some interest from a lot of Geddon players about making worlds. If the zone community will make an exception for us and let us have a throw together non-qualified team, I think there's some very real interest in coming over and meeting you folks in person. And hopefully some of you will come over here and check out what we're doing.
I think there'd be definitely people on the Worlds Council that would see the opportunity and all that to make sure that something like that can happen. I don't know what the rules are with teams and stuff like that and team selections, but I think there's a general, desire for the cross pollination of all the systems to happen, of all the scenes to happen, I should say. So I look forward to hearing Moldy from New Zealand's response. Hopefully he can get his ears on this and put it on the agenda for the Worlds Council. But that'll be wonderful to see you guys come over. Got a whole year to save, guys.
I'm ready. The credit card balance is at 0, so I'm ready for that trip. Ever since I found out about the zone and 4 scenes in Australia and New Zealand, that has been a bucket list thing for me. And I know several people that have done it for zone, Skywalker and the Baltimore zone guys. Shout out to all those guys. That is technically my home zone center, even though I never competed on any of their teams. But shout out to the Balti guys. Everyone has always said the hospitality is amazing. The things to do and see are just incredible, above and beyond the level of competition. But all 3 of us here are nerdy enough that we would just go for the competition too.
It's a bucket lister. If you haven't been to a zone Australasian Championship, it's an absolute bucket lister. Essentially the home site closes for 10 days, and it's 8 a.m. to midnight every day, laser tag, all side events, 200-ish players, I should say. It's just an absolute, it's been such a well-oiled machine now with the volunteer teams and all the things that go into it, that it's really, I think as an international player, it's something that you'd really enjoy. So Sunshine Coast 2025, that's an excellent location if I'm going to pitch for anything. Albury's getting a bit late, but that's middle of June next year. Certainly come to that one if you can, but Sunny Coast 2025 will be about March-ish, probably February, March. They're slowly moving it back to February, March, which was the original dates. During COVID, all the dates kind of changed, essentially. So year by year, they're transitioning by moving it back a couple of months. So by 2025, Sunshine Coast is a very nice area, lots of beautiful scenery. It's about an hour or 2 hours up the road from me. I used to live there, essentially, so I know it very well, and has an excellent arena, very, very good arena. All right, guys. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on today. George, Sean, Scott, thank you so much for jumping on, and we hope to talk to you again soon, and best of luck with the organising of Armageddon.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.